All right, welcome back to Between the Edits. My name is Grace, and today I am joined by Erin Phillips. She is an independent author, and I also recently heard her give a presentation at a writers' conference that I attended. So I knew I was really excited to get her on this first season. She is multi-talented, has a lot of stuff going on, and we'll definitely dive into all of that. But first, Erin, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Uh, I'm Erin. I'm super excited to be on here with Grace and to get to chat some. I have three books out. All of them are dark fantasy retellings. Two of them are biblical retellings, and one is the Count of Monte Cristo. Um, yeah, and I'm married. I got two dogs, and it's pretty great. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. That's the best intro yet. Perfect. So I wanted to start off with how did you get into writing?
Well, I've always loved telling stories. Like even when I was a little girl, before I could write, I would like force my family to listen to me tell silly stories around the dinner table. And so ever since I could talk, I was loving telling stories. My parents were really diligent to read with me growing up every night before bed. So our house was just always filled with a love of story. And it was just natural as I started to learn how to write to start writing my own stories. And fan fiction, I was a Star Wars girly, so I love to write Star Wars fan fiction. And just kind of, it was just a part of my entire growing up was storytelling. So naturally, after I graduated college and I had all this free time again, started writing again, it just still slowly took over my life, I guess I would say.
So when you were younger, what was your inspiration for like reading and things like that? What were the types of things you like to read, and how did you see that maybe play into your writing as you got into that era, we'll call it?
Yeah, I remember I really loved Redwall was one of the first books that I read when I was small and just like really became obsessed with the Redwall books. And then I read Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine,
Ah.
and she has a lot of resources for um young writers who like just want to write. And so that really was a thing that got me first started writing of like oh, this author I love, she believes in me. Um, so those were kind of foundational. I fell in love with The Hobbit when I was in middle school and just read that book over and over again. And then as I started becoming more like a teenager, I couldn't really find a lot that was really holding my interest. Like this was around the time when like Harry Potter was coming out, so the
Mhm.
young adult genre was just not what it is today.
Absolutely.
Like there
Yeah.
wasn't as much buildup around it. So I started reading a lot of thrillers. I read a lot of Ted Dekker and Frank Peretti. And so kind of all of those, reading the classics and middle grade and then jumping right into like Christian thriller definitely laid a foundation, I think, for the kinds of stories I still love and write today. Yeah.
Right. So, how did you go from starting to experiment with writing, right? Did you like, go straight into like writing full length like books? Were you writing short stories, poetry? Everyone kind of has a different journey of how they get into writing
Mm,
to that first book that you get published. So, what did that journey look like for you?
yeah. So I would say I would consider them full-length novels when I was writing them. I have no idea what the word count is now.
Yeah.
Um, but I was certainly endeavoring to like write novels, write like, chunky books.
Hmm.
And I also did a lot of songwriting. I took piano lessons
Hmm.
for like 10 years growing up. So I love to also write songs and lyrics and things like that. And then when I graduated college, I married a songwriter, a musician, and so we ended up writing a lot of musicals together, and that kind of laid a foundation for. We were writing musicals, and I was writing my first book, which is The Keeper, which you've probably never heard about, will never hear about ever again. But that kind of put me on this track of like, um, I want to learn more about what it takes to take a novel from that first draft and actually like edit it and figure out all of these little things to get it published so that my friends and family can read what I'm writing.
Right.
And so that was really my motivation behind that first book. It wasn't really like a thing I ever intended for strangers to read, but it was just like a fun thing I was doing on the side while I was working, and I wanted to be able to share that with my friends and family when they were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm writing a book and you can read
Here it
it
is.
now." Yeah,
It's real. It's on
exactly.
paper.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So you actually got started writing in a couple of different ways, but
Mhm.
I would love to hear some of the differences between writing a musical and then writing a novel.
Mm,
Because I'm assuming a lot of
yeah.
the kind of story elements could be very similar, but then the mechanics of how you
Mhm.
kind of display them or show them are probably different between the mediums. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it is like a big thing with musicals is time economy. So you only have like say 20 scenes in your entire show if it's like a Broadway style musical. And so every scene like you really want to make the most of it, and like every line of dialogue like takes up time and every song takes up time. So you only have, a theater company, if you're renting a venue, you only have that theater space for a certain amount of time. So when you're writing a musical, you have to keep in mind that like, you have an audience for 2.5 hours and like you really don't want to go over that,
Hmm.
because then you start to lose your audience or cut into the time you have in that venue space, different things like that. So I learned a lot from writing musicals about pacing, and about how to kill your darlings and cut out the fluff, and all that stuff. And then another difference with musicals is it's a two-act structure because you'll have the first act and then an intermission and then the second act.
Hmm.
And so that's pretty different. In novels, we tend to think about it as like a three-act
Right.
structure, whereas with a musical, it's quite different pacing wise with that. Um, and then the other thing I think with musicals is it's much more collaborative. So when you're writing a musical, you're just writing dialogue, very little stage direction, because like a lot of theaters will even like black out stage direction because directors want to bring their own vision to things. So really all you have is dialogue and lyrics. And so that is fairly different, because you're creating something to give to a director and actors and a theater company that they can
Hmm.
then take and bring to life in a very unique way every single time.
Hmm.
Whereas with a novel, it's like, this is what it is. And it will only ever be this. And the only variation of this will be like an audiobook, collaborating with a narrator will bring a
Right.
little bit of
Hmm.
unique flair. Um, and unless you get like a big movie adaptation or something like that. And so you have a lot more control over the complete vision, um, which is fairly different from like the perspective you have to have when writing a musical. Yeah.
Right. It's almost like you're laying the bones for the musical and then you're working with the
Mm-hmm.
director and the cast to kind of bring it to life. Whereas as an author,
Mm-hmm.
you're adding the meat to the bones as you go, the
Yep.
whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um
Yep. You're a Frankenstein monster. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, piecing it together. Um,
Uh-huh.
is there one that so they're unique and special in their own ways. Is there one that you find is maybe easier for you or that you prefer over the other, or are both of them kind of just I love them
Mm.
both but differently?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a complex answer, I would say.
We love
I
that.
really loved our time writing musicals because it was something I was doing with my husband. And so that was really fun. And I loved writing dialogue and lyrics and then collaborating together and cutting songs that he loved for the necessity of the musical. And so we had a lot of like fun and sweet memories there. But the theater space, um, I wasn't like fully gifted to exist in, I guess you could say, especially with what we were doing with licensing and producing musicals at the time. Um, like my love is storytelling and writing.
Hmm.
And theater ended up putting me in a lot of spaces where um I didn't feel equipped to really handle it, I suppose you could say.
Okay.
And from that, we really learned we have a saying we say in our house, which is that a need isn't a calling.
Mm,
And so, even though we felt like there was this big need in theater for more Christian musicals and Christ-centered musicals, that need wasn't necessarily my calling. And so being an author and just novel writing, there's some sweetness, like some bittersweetness in giving up writing musicals and working in
mm.
that space. But I feel a lot more like spiritually and artistically satisfied writing novels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I love that message. I don't, um, it's simple, but it's so good. A need is not a calling. Um,
Mhm.
it makes me think about how much would you say that that experience, going through that, doing the musicals, learning how, like you said, the skills that are required for the time economy of that kind of production. You
Mhm.
also mentioned, killing the darling and cutting out the fluff and things like that. Being able to see how dialogue, how important dialogue is.
Mhm.
Do you think that those are things that were important for you to learn and experience through the musicals that then prepared you for the true calling of being an author?
Oh yeah, totally. I think like there's so much I learned about storytelling in that time
Mhm.
and even about like as a producer like collaborating, managing like budgets and working with a team, hiring all of my own people, things like that. Those are skills that like have certainly directly transferred to being a self-published author.
Mhm.
Um and so I learned a lot there and I think it gave me a little bit of time where I was able to really go hard and invest a lot into something and then carry those things over. Like A Crown of Chains was the book that I wrote after shutting down our theater. And I think it really shows like my books before then. There was definitely a lack of, I was learning as I was going,
Mhm.
but there was so much growth that happened
Mhm.
in our time in theater that I think really showed when I finally went all in with A Crown of Chains. There's just my skill level and intentionality was raised a lot. I learned so much about like excellence and what that looks like.
Mhm.
Um, and just all of these different things I think I would
Yeah.
have never learned without my time in theater that I'm really, really thankful for. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even just
Mhm.
that perspective for you personally, understanding, like you said, going back to the need, not a calling,
Mhm.
bringing that perspective into your writing probably also made a big difference
Yeah.
in really pursuing it, sounds like too.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think I feel very um reassured and validated that like I'm doing exactly what God made me to do because
Hmm.
I've spent so much time like where I'm using only bits and pieces of my gifting
Hmm.
or stretching myself thin in areas where I'm not skilled in or not naturally inclined to that when I went all in like there was a lot of validation and affirming of like this is what I was made to do.
Right.
And so that is something that I can really call back on, in those times when imposter syndrome hits
Oh,
or feeling discouraged of like, no, but like I know that this is what God made me to do. And just resting in that. There's a lot of peace in that for sure.
yeah. I think one thing you commonly hear from people when they have found something that they believe is to be their calling, right? It can feel effortless in a lot of ways. And you hear that. And
Mhm.
then the people who are doing what they believe to be their calling, but then they feel like they're running into roadblock after roadblock, they're like, it's not effortless for me. But I think what people mean a lot of times when they say that is like everybody's always going to face challenges, especially as Christians,
Mhm.
we're promised that.
Mhm.
But even when you're facing those challenges, I think it's different when you know why you're doing something, that those
Yeah.
challenges, you have a lot more intrinsic drive to face them head on, to overcome
Mhm.
them, to learn from them, and those kinds of things. And so it doesn't necessarily make it easier to go through those experiences, but you're able to understand it better as you're going through it. And so maybe
Yeah.
that's a little bit of
Mm.
where that effortlessness feels come from.
Yeah, I think so. I think like yeah, there's like inner peace and outer peace are different things.
Mm.
And I think like feeling assured in your calling and doing what God has made you to do, it gives you some inner peace that you can rely on when things are not peaceful outside
Hmm.
in your circumstances, or as you're working on that project, or as you get a really hard edit letter, or sales aren't what you hope for them to be.
Right.
Um, I think that that's where that feeling of like effortlessness of like I feel peace
Right.
with this, even if,
The
yeah,
road's a little
yeah.
bumpy.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually created a perfect transition for me there, doing my job of into you mentioned
Woo!
your self-publishing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something that I love to focus on when I'm interviewing independent authors. I also the first episode of this podcast was a independent bookstore owner. So speak a little
Oh,
bit about the
cool.
decision to do self-publishing so that you could be an independent author and why that was an important decision for you.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, like I really got started with self-publishing back in the day. It was called Create Space. Just as like it was like solely a hobby. It was just a thing that I was doing for fun to get to share my stories with people that I loved. And when I wrote a book called Polarity, which was my third book, I really felt like I'd grown a lot as a writer, and I was like, this will be it. Like this will be my breakout novel. But at the time I was running the theater and I just had no energy to give to querying or things like that. And so I ended up self-publishing that book like more as closure because like at the time I was like,
Mhm.
well, my future's in theater. That's what I'm giving my life to. So I'll just get this one out of my hands and on the internet, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore. But when I wrote A Crown of Chains, I really felt like that was a story that wasn't just for me or just a hobby. Like it felt like this is a book that is for someone else out there.
Mhm.
And so I sent out like one query letter, I think, but it was in the late fall, which is a bad time to query. And so I was like, my hopes were not very high. But I remember having a conversation with my husband where he was like, what would it really take for us to just self-publish it, like really professionally? And so I started really praying about that and doing a lot of research about budgeting and all of these cost things and also like market research. And, Crown of Chains is a biblical retelling of Queen Esther, but it's dark fantasy and it's not like your typical Esther falls in love with the king story. And so I had some reservations that a Christian market publisher would be really interested in that book. I wasn't seeing it fitting in that market super smoothly. But of course, like it is pretty explicitly faith-based. So a general market publisher like probably would have a hard time shelving it as well and seeing it as fitting in with their lineup. And so as I was really praying over these things and making my pros and cons list, I was just like really convicted that like I know who the reader is for this book.
Mhm.
Um, and there is 100% an audience for this book, but I understand why it would feel like a risk to a publisher. And in considering that, and then having conversations with my husband about budgeting, um, we were just kind of like, I think we should just like let's self-publish because I know how to do that now. Like I've self-published 3 books. Like I have some experience under my belt with the technicalities of that.
Right.
Um, but let's do it like with excellence and like to make a product that's worthy of, a reader to pay for it, that can sit on her shelves alongside traditionally published works and not be able to know the difference. And let's like really go for that. So my husband at the time, he's a music composer and he picked up a gig and he was like, okay, I'm going to do music for this video game and we're going to take all that money and we're going to put it towards the book, which was so, so kind. He's like my biggest cheerleader and supporter. And so that's what we did. And just worked really hard to like try to get a really good cover, learn how to format like super good, figure out all the weird stuff, and just really went for it. And like God really honored that. And so I've been really thankful for the blessings that God has given over that book and to helping me to reach readers with it. I had such an incredible street team for A Crown of Chains that really helped get the word out.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I've just kind of been living in that lane because I'm really comfortable there now.
Well, and you mentioned, from the get-go, you said you wanted let's do it with excellence, right? And I think you mentioned a key point in executing that vision is knowing your target audience. I think
Hmm.
I feel like I probably say it in every episode, every discussion, but it's just so relevant. It comes up where a lot of
Yeah.
independent authors, I don't think, understand the beast of marketing.
Mm.
And the way that you can make that a lot easier on yourself is really spending time with your novel and with yourself and with, if you've
Hmm.
gone through editing rounds of editing or beta readers or anything like that, like anyone who's read your novel and has feedback on it, really sit with that for a little bit and try to figure out,
Yeah.
okay, who am I speaking to with this book and how would
Hmm.
I speak to them about this book? And
Yeah.
it's not that that necessarily makes all of the legwork of doing the editing a lot easier, but you have so much more direction. Is that something that you found to
Mm.
be the same for your work as well?
Yeah, I think something that I've learned with my more recent works that's been helpful for me is like I write the first draft for me. Like that's my time with like no one's ever going to read this book except for me and Jesus, and I really treasure that. But once that first draft is done, like I definitely very seriously take some time to think about like very specifically like who is the target reader for this book and like not even just like it's young adult girls who love Jesus, you know? It's
Mhm.
like I try to get really specific about like, what does her life look like? What struggles is she facing? Like what is her family dynamics? What are her friend groups?
Mhm.
Um what are her favorite books on her shelf? Like, I really try to dig into those things with every single book, because that helps me as I move into editing to know, like, okay, now I'm not the target reader.
Mhm.
I want to speak, like, if I was sitting down and reading this book alongside her, like, what would resonate with her? How can I, like, invite her into the story? How can she feel seen by these characters and relate to them? And that's really helpful in guiding my process, like, from that first round of revisions, like all the way through marketing.
Mhm.
Um, I think has been really, really helpful. And then of course, like when you make a target that specific, if you're off the mark just a little bit, like it's
Right.
still going to deeply resonate with people. And even if it's only one thing that deeply resonates with someone, that like still matters a lot and can help to make a sale or make that book like someone's favorite book. Um, so yeah, I think I don't know if that's something everyone does, but that's how the process has certainly worked for me.
I think it'd be super helpful. And just to make a connection again to pointing back to Christ is it's the exact same premise there, right? It's he set
Yeah.
the mark for perfection and we'll never hit it. We'll never hit it. But the
Hmm.
closer you aim, the closer you get. And that makes a
Hmm.
difference. So, you know you're gonna miss the mark, but being specific about how you're going about hitting that aim is gonna mean the difference between,
Hmm.
it's gonna pay dividends. It's gonna compound.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, one of my like favorite stories that has been really helpful for me, I think, in my journey as an author is I love the parable of the lost sheep, how like Jesus goes after the one. And I think about my books a lot more that way of like there's this musical called Title of Show where they have a song that says, I'd rather be nine people's favorite thing than 100 people's ninth favorite thing.
Right.
And that with like the parable of the lost sheep of going after the one, I think pretty much encapsulates like what I try to do. Like I'm not trying to be everyone's like get on everyone's list, be like a best-selling author. Like I really just want to like write books that deeply resonate
Mhm.
with um a few people over being like an okay book for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that element of being genuine about it really helps with the authenticity of the book and how it resonates with
Mhm.
readers, which is one of the questions I
Yeah.
had on here. Again, you're just making this effortless for me was, have you noticed any of your books in particular resonate with people in special ways? Like the feedback you get as an author. I'm sure
Mhm.
you've gotten that feedback before, but is there something that stands out in your mind is like this book in particular resonated with people for this special reason? And I didn't expect that,
Mm.
but we're here.
Oh yeah. Um, I feel like every one of my books, like I think hits people differently. Um, like individuals, there's just a lot going on in them.
Hmm.
Um, but that is like the thing that I like really look for. Like when I feel like, okay, I've made it, like this book is good, is when I get one review from someone who is like, this book changed my life. And once I get that one review, I'm like, okay, I don't need any more reviews ever again. Like
Right.
the Lord used this book in the way that I would hope he did. But I feel like with like A Bond of Briars is probably a book that I think if you get it, you get it kind of thing. A Crown of Chains is like blows all of my other books out of the water. People love it. But A Bond of Briars, I think I remember like my first, like that one review that I got for A Bond of Briars was just from someone saying that how she like really understood like the love of Jesus for her by reading that story. That like, Jesus loves us in a way that meets us right where we are and but he loves us too much to leave us there. And that's kind of what, it's a retelling of Ruth, but it's really like an allegory for the gospel. And so I think when I get reviews like that where it's like someone loved this story, not really because of the story, but
Hmm.
because of the way it made them feel seen. Those are the reviews and the comments I get from readers that I think like stick with me the most and make me feel like, okay, like all the money I spent on this was worth it for that one person.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
That would be the one. That's it's
Yeah.
incredibly special to get that kind of feedback. And like you're saying, right, is like
Mhm.
one person, having that much of an
Yeah.
impact, makes it all worth it.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
we've been talking a lot about how your faith has impacted your writing and kind of your mission behind writing and how that has really just helped the whole thing flourish. Do you want to speak a little bit about your faith? And then I had a particular question regarding, I know that you said you get into some of the elements of darker fantasy elements and things like that.
Hmm.
So I'll have a follow-up question for you regarding that aspect.
Yeah, well, my husband is a worship pastor, so I'm a pastor's wife, which probably makes some sense if you see how much I post about faith and stuff on my social media. But for me, like I think over the years as I've gotten older and really my faith has become my own, just seeing it more and more as like Christ is the foundation that I want my identity built on, like more so than being an author or a playwright or a wife or whatever other role I have in this life. For me, like the most important thing that people know about me is that I love Jesus. And so that's become more and more important with my platform and my presence as an author, because I feel like that's the most important thing is if someone comes and they buy my book and they read it and they love it, that's great. And I appreciate every single one of those people. But if they come and they meet me or they see me on social media or they read my book and they walk away having no idea that I'm a Christian and that like Jesus is the most important part of my life, then I think I'm not taking full advantage of the platform God has given me, to just share about Jesus's love, and what he did for us, dying for us on the cross, like for our sins. He don't have to be perfect, but he can redeem our lives. And I think living in that surrender is like the most important thing to me. I say a lot that like, everything is like this is my offering. Like my books are an offering to Jesus. Work heartily for the Lord and love other people. And books are a way that I get to love God and love others. But like it's not the most important thing. Like I would for sure give up, I would never write another book again if it was between, okay, you can keep writing books or you could be a Christian. Like there's
Mhm.
no that's not a choice for me. It's
Right.
like so obvious.
Right.
And so even though like my books don't ever like they're not like typical Christian fiction, like there's no like literal Jesus or
Right.
things like that, like Betrayal of Eden, like really has very little like faith in the story, like my foundation on like the word of God and things like that are core to like the way that I see everything. And so it's also core to the way that I tell stories. Um yeah, so I could just talk about that forever, but I know we want to talk about other stuff.
Well, and again, you ended it on a perfect point. So the follow-up question I had that I loved is this was the kind of part of the topic that you gave that presentation on at Story Embers, the
Mhm.
conference of
Yeah.
how to be a Christian author, right? But not be afraid of getting into those darker elements of stories that are real things for people and
Hmm.
things like that. So I would love to for you to kind of for the listeners here give a little bit of an explanation on how you personally walk that line between exploring those darker elements for the sake of glorifying Christ in those moments and resonating with
Hmm.
people in those spaces without falling into the pitfalls of, glorifying the darkness through the story, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, the thing we've been talking about the whole time, like a need isn't a calling, right?
Mhm.
So we have needs for all kinds of stories. To resonate with people and help them be seen. Like, I firmly believe like we were made for story. Like Jesus was a storyteller. He taught through story. Like story is a foundational way that we are made to grow and reflect on our own lives and learn to accept truth on a deeper level, like through experiencing it through fiction.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think writing about things that are darker, partially is like, obviously, I talked about way in the beginning, like, I love like thrillers, I love horror, like, I grew up reading those genres. And I firmly believe that like the light can shine really bright in a dark space. And I think that that's necessary because, you know, life is pretty hard. And some people go through a lot harder things,
Mhm.
have a lot more trauma in their life, have to endure things that some of us could never even like imagine.
Mhm.
And so when we write books about those things and go into those places, it's bringing that light into that space. Um, and so I really like every book I feel like is different. The kind of darkness is in it. Like A Crown of Chains deals with abuse um
Mhm.
within the story of Esther. And that is a very different kind of darkness than like in A Bond of Briars, which has like witchcraft in it. Um and Betrayal of Eden is just like the saddest book you'll ever read. And I think, in each of those spaces, like being very intentional about like um why you're going into that space and searching it, having the Holy Spirit, like I think like when I think about writing A Crown of Chains, which had like very difficult stuff to talk about, I also like spent a lot of time like researching and I had a lot of conversations with people. Knew a lot of people who had experiences.
Mhm.
And God had put me in positions to be able to write on some of those topics um, that are more difficult.
Mhm.
Um, with A Bond of Briars, there's this inherent allegory in A Bond of Briars about the gospel, but also Ruth's history as a Moabitess. Like Moabites were like super gross. They're like way grosser than they are in my book. And I think just having a desire to like show the beauty of the gospel and the redemptive love of Jesus, the sacrificial love of Jesus, that it doesn't matter where we come from or the kind of gross, dark things that we bring with us, like his love covers all of that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm getting off topic. I'm just going to start rambling. But so I think like, being prayerful about those things, like not being flippant about it. Like I didn't just go in to write those books being like, oh, this will be so dark and gritty and shocking. Like those are bad reasons. Those are dangerous reasons. But instead having a really soft, compassionate heart, being really sensitive and obedient to the Holy Spirit, within that process,
Mhm.
I think is really important. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Does that? I kind of went off on a
No,
tangent,
it was
but
beautiful. It was beautiful. Yeah.
okay.
It makes me think so. Are there moments when you're writing and you feel like I need to pull back a little bit?
Mm, yeah. I mean, I think
Mhm.
yeah, with the Bond of Briars, like specifically, researching for that book was really difficult
Mhm.
because obviously the occult is real,
Mhm.
and I'm creating a fantasy magic system, but I wanted it to be reminiscent enough of the real thing, if you want to say, that it wasn't entirely like, ooh, like, magical whimsicalness,
Right.
I wanted it to have that edge of um darkness.
Right.
But I was also like, I remember very specifically, like, um I was working on my magic system, and it's a blood magic system, so like working on those things and just really feeling like, okay, I think it's time to like not worry so much about research and just start being creative,
Mm.
um, using my own imagination and creating something that does have distance. So I'm not bringing people, being very intentional that I'm not bringing myself or people to a place that's um, inviting darkness into the story,
Right.
um, and feeling like, representing something isn't the same thing as like creating a space for it, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Um, And on the flip side, like the first draft of A Bond of Briars, like I mentioned before, I very much write the first draft for myself and what I
Mhm.
can handle. And being sensitive in the ways I need to be sensitive, having boundaries for myself. But the first draft of A Bond of Briars was definitely a lot more like graphic and gory. And after I wrote it, like I was very intentional with like, now who is my reader?
Right.
And I was very just from experiences that I've had with close friends and stuff, I was very sensitive to this book not having self-harm in it.
Hmm.
So it's blood magic, but I was like, okay, I want to really make sure that I'm not taking someone to that space.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of really heavy rewriting that happened with that book to make sure that um, spiritually it was safe, but also for anyone who has specific triggers that it was safe. And I think being really intentional, like considering who is going to pick up this book and making sure that it's safe for them,
Hmm.
even if it's dark, I think is very important. People are always going to have their own sensitivities, and someone's not going to pick up my book. I think I'm pretty explicit that it deals with blood magic. And so if someone is really sensitive to that,
Hmm.
hopefully the blurb is enough to let them know that this book isn't for you. But that doesn't mean that I just, okay, well, there's no restraints on the story because people understand what they're getting into. I still really try to be intentional and care for my readers, that I'm ushering them through the story in a way that they feel cared for, as best that I can.
Right. Still doing the mission of trying to represent how they can be lifted out of that darkness, right? And you
Yeah.
have to be willing to step into it in order to see how a character is lifted out of it, to walk through that journey with
Yeah.
the character. But like you were saying, walking that line of not needing to venture so far in there. And I think one of the things that is also really helpful for writers is there's, like you said, first draft writing for yourself. And there are some authors
hmm
or writers that only ever write for themselves, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I know someone
hmm
personally who does that, and she loves it. Um, but I think if you are going to start getting into publishing, in which you're going to be sharing your book with, hundreds of thousands of millions of people, right? Um, it's worth it to
Lord
take
willing.
some
Yeah.
time. Exactly. It's worth it to take some time to think very carefully about how your book is going to be received by a general
Hmm.
multitude of people. It's important that you still maintain your integrity as an author, which I know is one of the reasons why you and many other people choose to do self-publishing, so that you have that creative control over the final product of your book. But that
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that there's not room in that process to consider how is my book going to be received by the readers who I want to read it. I think those can
Yeah.
sometimes be maybe conflated, and I think they're actually very separate, where, you have creative control of your book and the mission and the purpose and the message of the book is very much what you want it to be. But then how you represent that, your book is for readers if you're going to be publishing it. And so I think it is
Yeah.
crucial to take that into consideration. And you did a very good job of explaining kind of all the reasons why that's important and how you can go about doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that is one thing that sometimes we as self-published authors receive the wrong way is this idea of like, I can do anything I want. No one is going to tell me no. Where really that's not freedom, it's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Um, like you're not just the author. You don't have an editor or a publisher who's going to say, I don't think this is a good thing for your story or a good thing for your reader or marketable to your audience. You have to be able to say no to yourself. Um, and take like when you get that edit letter or you get critique from a beta reader, you have to take it a lot more seriously in some ways,
Mhm.
because you can just brush off anything. You can just say, "Well, I don't think so." Like I'm editing right now, and there was like one little line. It was like a line that a beta reader had noted, and she was like, "I think this is pretentious and performative as a line." And I was like, "It's not poetry. It's not like prose." And I remember thinking, I think that line's fine. But I had a moment where I was like, who cares? Like, it's just a line. Like, if she feels that way, like, it's not that important.
Mhm.
And so I deleted the line,
Mhm.
and rewrote it a little bit. And I think we have to be able to do that. As self-published authors, like, you have to be able to, like, let go of stuff,
Mhm.
and realize the story is more important than any one character or line or moment. And you have to make those cuts yourself. And that can be really difficult. But I think if you can learn to say no to yourself, I mean, it's like self-discipline across the board of life, as a human.
Mhm.
But learning to say no to yourself, I think, and receive feedback, is one of those things that I think takes your story to the next level as a self-published author, because no one's going to force you to do anything. So sometimes you have to force yourself to do something maybe you don't want to do, but because an editor has said this isn't working, to take that seriously and be like,
Mhm.
okay, like it's not working. I hired them for a reason and they are very smart. And so I need to receive that and use that to strengthen my
Mhm.
novel instead of just being like, well, I
Yeah.
don't have to. I can do whatever I want. Yeah.
It's so hard to be objective sometimes because this is your baby, this is your brainchild, and you're so
Hmm.
close to it, right? So opening yourself up to
Yeah.
criticism is difficult, but entirely necessary for the process.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things that there's lots of reasons why someone might choose to self-publish versus trying to query with a traditional publisher. You shared some
Hmm.
genuine reasons for that, but one of the things you commonly hear is that aspect of creative control. And I think that's perfectly fine as a reason for wanting to go with
Hmm.
self-publishing, again, in conjunction with a dozen other reasons. But doing so, you should be informed about that decision, in which you're giving up a lot of great things that publishers do, which is they help you identify
Hmm.
your target market. They help you
Right.
identify how to speak to them. They help you
Hmm.
with figuring out, like you're saying, like the things in your book that may turn off your target audience and end up creating a
Yeah.
conflicting or confusing reading experience for the people that you're marketing it to. And so they have
Hmm.
lots of resources that help you get very in-depth kind of perspective on those things. They've got their editors, their formatters, their cover artists, that they work with that are all designed to help you with that process. And so that's a lot of very positive things that come out of traditional publishing. And so if
Hmm.
you're
Yeah.
making an informed decision to forego that, you then have to understand that those same responsibilities should be taken into consideration by you to the
Mhm.
reasonable extent that you're able.
Yeah.
So obviously it's very difficult for an independent author to compete with the resources available that a traditional publisher would have. But
Hmm.
there's tons of people out there who love to beta read and arc read and leave
Hmm.
reviews. And so there are readers out there who will love your work and will be honest with you about their thoughts on it. And being open to that
Hmm.
is absolutely critical to having that book reach the audience and deliver the impact that you want from it. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot because you weren't ready to receive loving,
Hmm.
intentional feedback about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, if you're considering going between like traditional publishing or indie publishing, like, um, I think that both are like really great. I'm not one of
Mhm.
those indies who's like demonizes traditional publishing, because there are a lot of really great um things that come with traditional publishing. Like you do give up some creative control, but what you're getting is very professional feedback and guidance.
Mhm.
You're giving up control of your cover, but you probably are going to get to work with really excellent cover designers and formatters. So the control you're giving up, like you are getting something in return for that.
Mhm.
um Being self-published, like, a big motivator for me obviously was like, well, I don't think a publisher is going to publish this book, but I think it has value and a reader out there. And then you get a higher royalty, so which
Mhm.
helps to make back because you're the one spending all the money.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So like, I would say for every pro that one side of publishing has, like it's counteracting, like the pros and cons are almost like perfectly in line.
Hmm.
You give up having to spend, your own money to publish a book, but you're also giving up that larger royalty. So like, um everything kind of, I think it's really just sitting down and thinking like, what am I capable of handling? What do I
Hmm.
feel gifted and able to do?
Right. What are
Um
my strengths and
all
weaknesses?
of those, yeah, like really thinking through like what do I want for my books? Like, if you have a dream to see your book in Barnes and Noble for it to be available there, like you're gonna have a really hard time making that happen with self-publishing.
Hmm.
And so maybe I've always told people like, if you have that dream, like maybe God's giving you that dream because you're supposed to take this path. And
Hmm.
that's the path that book needs to be on. Because I think that God can use our hopes and dreams to set us in the direction we're supposed to go. So I think just taking time to be really, really reflective
Hmm.
um, on your dreams, on the path it would take to get there, and then also on your resources and on your skills. Like those things can be really helpful in figuring out, okay, what direction should I go for this book? Don't just base it off of, I want to design my own cover. Like that
Hmm.
will not take you very far. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break from the conversation so I can tell you a little bit about a great product. You may have already heard me discuss this on the podcast, but I have what I call my legacy bookshelf. This is a special bookshelf reserved only for those books which I cherish enough to want to pass on to my children. Knowing this, a close friend of mine gifted me this custom book embosser. And here's how easy it is to use. So you can just squeeze this, and this comes right out. And then to put it back in, just clicks right back into place. And then this is a book. This is one of my favorite books. This book has an inscription to me from my grandma who gifted it to me at Christmas. And right below that is my custom seal. Now I can have a true collection of legacy books that I'll pass down to my kids, all marked with a custom seal. This is a great gift for book lovers. Use the affiliate link in the description or code BETWEEN at checkout. That's spelled BETWEEN. Using this link or that code helps support the podcast and is truly appreciated. Now back to the podcast. So, a lot of these things that we have been talking about are like great pieces of advice for aspiring authors, and helping them make the decisions that can feel very overwhelming and, lots of information out there, which is amazing, but, you're going to find 12 different opinions on the same topic, and all of them have
Hmm.
valid points. So
Yeah.
when you were getting into self-publishing, right, you said that you had done a couple of stories before that you kind of did just for you and your families and all that kind of stuff. And then when you decided that, okay, let's do this with excellence, when you wanted to do that with um, your first book, what was some of the unexpected realities that you ran into that kind of surprised you, or maybe were roadblocks in the
Mm,
way, bumps in the road, things that you did not expect to pop up, even having a little bit of experience with the technical side of the self-publishing?
mm. Yeah, I think the hardest thing with A Crown of Chains, which was like the first book that I like really like put out there and market it and all this stuff was um I'd only had experience with people who were very kind because they knew me. And so of course they were like, I love your book. Um and I think the first like scathing one-star review I got was like so devastating.
Mm,
Um like I had never like had someone like not only like rip my book to shreds, but also like make personal accusations towards me about things because, like my book being like fantasy and a retelling of a Bible story. And I had no idea that that was going to be a thing people had like huge problems with.
mhm,
Um, and so I think really for me, the hardest part has been growing a thicker skin, um, for like, trying to be assured that like, I really did my best with this book and there are people who love it and not letting those haters, like be not let the negativity be the loudest voice in the room,
mm,
has been really hard. Um, and something that like I've learned to process over time a little bit better, um and things like that. They get better, but they also get better because I learned, well, you don't go read those reviews. You don't read every single review that comes in for your book.
yeah.
You don't have to reply to every single comment on Instagram. Being able to identify the difference between um like a worthwhile conversation and a
Hmm.
waste of time has been really helpful, but really difficult to learn. Um yeah, I think like, everything else, like, you get better at taking feedback and formatting and all of the technical stuff. Like
Hmm.
that stuff gets easier, I would say. And partly it gets easier because you learn to expect to be frustrated.
Hmm.
Frustration is just kind of part of it. But the thing that really took a lot of um, prayer and like intentional effort
Hmm.
was the negativity that comes with being an author whose books are being read by strangers. Yeah.
Right. Has
hmm
those lessons that you've learned, how have they, if at all, translated into your personal life? Have you noticed that going through those experiences
Mm.
professionally has impacted you personally?
Yeah. I think for a while when it was really hard, it made me like, I don't know, more private.
Mm,
Um, like not wanting to talk about certain things online, just because of seeing how much visibility I was having.
hmm.
Um, I think it also made me talk about my faith a lot more. When I experienced some like persecution about being a Christian, and things like that of like, okay, like this is like a thing that really matters.
Hmm.
Like I don't want people coming here and being upset at me for if people are going to come and be upset at me for being a Christian, I'm going to really be a Christian. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of how I took it. But before I got to that point, there was like a season of like maybe I don't want to be on social media. Like
Hmm.
got off of TikTok for like almost 2 years because of it. And so it took a long time to really um figure out how to navigate that, and then how to go to sleep at night, and not let those things be like keeping me up awake.
Right.
um yeah, I like struggled with anxiety for quite a while, and it had gotten better until like these
Hmm.
negativity started coming in. And so while that was really really hard to feel like, I thought that I had gotten over this, right? We always think that about stuff like that. And to have it come back was really discouraging and hard,
Right.
to have like anxiety again. And but it was also good because, God used that to take me into a deeper place of understanding how to seek after him for
Mhm.
peace, how to surrender things that were outside of my control to him. Like all these hardships, um are also opportunities to draw closer to Christ and like
Hmm.
understand deeper of, okay, like I'm not feeling a whole lot of peace. I don't know how casting my anxieties on him like is helping, but I'm gonna try.
Uh-huh.
Those things I think bringing those struggles to Christ like was invaluable.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah,
And Jesus continues to teach me things through writing and being in that space. But he's always been really good in it. Um, and so that's, I think, the biggest takeaway for sure.
absolutely. Yeah, it makes me think of pain points, which, are areas of your
Hmm.
body in which you apply pressure and you feel pain. And there, that's kind of a offhanded reference there, or whatever, but it's oftentimes referenced in
Yeah.
relation to things that come up in life and put you in pain, right? One type or
Hmm.
another. And it's an opportunity for you to say, okay, I'm feeling pain. Why am I feeling pain? And it points to,
Yeah.
you kind of really thinking about, like, for instance, that you mentioned your anxiety came up, and I can relate to this 100%. Figuring out, okay, why am I feeling this way? What can I
Hmm.
do about it? And one of the hardest things for me that I have found a lot of freedom with, I'm still getting better at, but a lot of freedom with since becoming a Christian. I became a Christian later in life, but feeling like taking that anxiety, right? You mentioned casting those anxieties onto him, felt to me like it was an abdication of my responsibility. Those are my feelings. I need to be the one
Mm.
to deal with them, right? But in reality,
Mm.
I am really bad at those things. I think most of us are. Like, there are things that are just not ever meant to be in our control sometimes. And so I was anxious about things that I was trying to control when I wasn't, like, I already proved that I wasn't good at that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be feeling anxious, right?
Hmm.
So those things
For
are
real.
God's responsibility, and there's a certain amount of freedom in that. I liked what you said earlier about, the conflation of freedoms with responsibilities. And so, of course, we still have
Hmm.
responsibilities over our actions, and all of those things, of course. But when it comes down to your sphere of control, sharing those responsibilities with God is how it's always meant to be,
Mm.
being partners
Hmm.
in those things.
Yeah.
And so having those pain points be identified can be really, really hard. But again, it's an opportunity to look at, okay, why am I in pain? Why does this hurt? Why does this make me
Yeah.
anxious? What is my role in that? What am I doing that's contributing to
Hmm.
those? And then how can I take that and point it back to Jesus and let him help me with it?
100%. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think like I really learned how codependent I was
Oh,
when I became an author. Because yeah, like you get that negativity and for me it sparks anxiety and learning that like I am not responsible for someone else's feelings was
hmm.
like a big journey.
Hmm.
And being able to like I love like my husband and I are really involved in recovery ministry. And I love, like, in the Serenity Prayer, it says to accept the things I cannot change, or Lord, give me the wisdom
Hmm.
to know the difference between, oh gosh, I can't remember word for word, but basically, like, what I control and what I can't.
Absolutely.
Let me know the difference and help me to change the things I can and accept the things that I can't. And
Hmm.
that has been really helpful, seeing how that works out in like the space of being an author of like, okay, like one thing I do is I make a list before I publish a book of every single thing I think someone might have a complaint about.
Mm.
And I like accept those things of like, I stand behind this, or I accept that there'll probably be four typos in my book. Like I accept that that is probably just a reality. Or someone's not gonna like this aspect of this book or this quality of this character or
Right.
this pacing decision or that it ends on a cliffhanger. Writing those things down and then accepting that like someone might not like this, but I stand behind it. And
Hmm.
so if I get a review that criticizes this, that's okay.
Absolutely.
Like they don't have to like I don't have to control how someone feels about my book. It has been like a really helpful thing to learn how to do.
Hmm.
And I think it helps like just in life overall of being able to, evaluate the choices that we make, but also then learn what hills we want to die on essentially, and
Exactly.
being like, I'm okay. I'm gonna like if someone doesn't like this about me or what I'm saying, like I can stand behind it. um, and just find like acceptance in that.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with receiving feedback and edits from people, how you mentioned you had the beta reader who left a comment of like this
Mhm.
sentence they had a particular issue with, and it forced you to reflect on that sentence and be like, okay, how important is this, you know? So that's an example from the
Yeah.
other perspective of, you know, that sentence was not on the list of things that to you as an author was important to have in the book. So not
Yeah.
a hill you were willing to die on, you know, and so
Yep.
yeah, being able to make those distinctions is, I think, a sign of a very mature author. So my hat's off to you. I think that probably shows through in your writing and how much people love it. Um, we'll wrap up here with a few couple more fun closing questions.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. What is your favorite part about being an author?
Oh, that's hard. There are so many really fun things about being an author. Um, oh, well, getting that review, getting that first,
Yeah.
not like the first review, like the first like I felt seen by this book review.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite things. I love getting letters. I have like letters that readers will send me. Um, those are always like really special treasures. Just to have like that more personal connection with readers. Like I love that in the modern day and age with social media, like readers can send me DMs and comment on my posts and we can talk about books that we both love that we're both reading. Like that is such a gift that I don't take for granted. Like as much as authors like we can easily complain about marketing, whatever. Like it is such a cool thing to get to connect like individually with readers. And really helpful for remembering that like every single reader who picks up my book like is a real person and to treasure that and be so thankful and grateful for that. um, yeah, I think on a technical side, I love the first round of rewrites with a book. Like writing the first draft is like not my favorite part. Like I find it hard, but I love when that first draft is done and I get to come back to it with fresh eyes and be like, okay, now I get to like make this good.
Hmm.
Like, and I have perspective and it's there in a rough way, and I get to go and clean it up and like really transform it into the story that is in my head. I love that first round of revisions. Yeah.
That's exciting. Yeah, something to look forward to for all the people who, you know, as you can relate to, struggle with that like first draft of just getting it done. You know, it's
Hmm.
such an accomplishment, but it's also such a trial.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
thinking about, you know, the first round of revisions to come, yeah, it's a really special process where you can kind of sit with your
Mhm.
book, like you said, you get a break from it, right? So you come back to it with fresh eyes, and it's almost
Yeah.
like experiencing your story as a reader again, like you know
Yeah.
everything, right? But at the same time, it feels new. It feels fresh, and that's exciting. And
Yeah.
you've got feedback, and you're continuing to refine it, and you can see what it's becoming. You're unearthing the gem
Hmm.
that's in it, you know, that you knew
Mm.
was there all along, but felt so hard to find. Yeah,
Yeah. And
inspiration
then you
for
have
everybody.
those days where you come across something and you're feeling like trash about it, and then you read one line and you're like, I wrote that, and you
Wow.
like feel good again. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Best feeling in the world. I think as far as like in a culture where we are kind of slowly eroding away our ability to delay gratification, writing a book will get it back.
Hmm.
Like
Yep.
takes so much time, but it's so worth it in the end. It feels amazing. Last fun question for you that we end on this one. I like to ask all of my guests to leave 2 to 3 book recommendations for our listeners. They're going to be in a
Ooh.
fun little season 1 recap reading suggestion list for everybody. So, yeah, what 2 to 3 books? I know it's really hard to pick. I almost
It
didn't
is.
ask this
It is.
question because I know how tricky it
No,
is.
it's a good
But
challenge.
yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
good.
have at it.
Okay, top of my list, Dearest Josephine by Caroline George. All of her books are fantastic. She is a fantastic human. She loves Jesus. Dearest Josephine is one of those books that I think no matter who you are or what kind of genre you like to read, you will love Dearest Josephine. So Dearest Josephine. Second pick, oh gosh. I'm gonna go with The Disappearances by Emily Bain Murphy. It's like a historical magical realism, but it's just really unique. It has a really beautiful message. And it's very cozy. So if you're looking for something, in that kind of vein, that is a beautiful book. And then I'll go with a classic that I love. Dracula by Bram Stoker is one of my
Oh,
favorite classic novels. I would say if all you know about Dracula is what you see in Hollywood, that is a very poor
correct.
representation of the book. The book has a lot of really great, deep spiritual themes. It is 100% light versus darkness, in that way we crave as Christians, and it has some incredibly beautiful quotes. So I think that is a great one, especially since we're in spooky season right now.
Very cool.
Dracula is a great classic to add to your TBR.
Perfect. Okay, those are amazing. I love just the variety that I get from all the different guests and the books they recommend. I was not expecting Dracula, but I love that. So that's gonna be really fun, and that'll be a great one to go on the list. So, Erin, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed getting to speak with you. You are so genuine and, well spoken, and really you can tell that there's like a heart there for just really caring for your readers on an individual level. I think you have a lot of great wisdom that is going to help a lot of independent authors who want to follow in your footsteps and learn alongside you as we all kind of reach for something bigger than us all.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you having me, Grace. This was like so much fun, and I can't wait to listen to all of the other episodes as well.
Perfect. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much.